Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kevin Bargness, and I work on the communications team at the Department of Planning and Development. I just want to advise you that this evening's meeting will be recorded and live streamed to DPD's YouTube page. I will be helping behind the scenes, ensuring everything runs smoothly. And with that, I'll kick it over to Cindy Rubik from DPD to get us started. Cindy?
Yeah, thank you so much, Kevin, and thank you everyone for joining. I know everyone has busy schedules, so I really want to take this opportunity to thank you in joining this virtual community forum. We're really here to listen to your feedback, and we also want to take this opportunity to explain what are the local impact funds and how much we've collected to date, and what projects would be eligible based on the funding ordinance. I first want to, we're co-hosting this meeting with Alderman Burnett, so I'll let him say a few words to everyone as well. Alderman?
Thank you, Cindy. You gotta excuse me, I'm at an event, but we want to thank you all for coming to do this. I wanted to make sure that the residents in the West Loop and the Near West area and in the ward know about the portion of the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund that's supposed to go back into the neighborhood. So I want to thank all of them for being on here so they can see what's going on and see what we can plan to do in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. I also want to take time, I'm joined by a couple of folks from the city. Fernando Espinoza, you want to say hi to everyone?
Good evening, Fernando Espinoza, City Planner with DPD.
Jeff?
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Jeff Shriver, the Director of Transportation Planning and Programming with the Chicago Department of Transportation.
Thanks, Jeff. We also have several folks from the local community groups. I'll start with Carla.
Hi, good evening. I'm Carla Gustinelli, the Executive Director of the West Loop Community Organization.
Thanks, Carla. And then do we want to go to Rod?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Rod Burks with the West Central Association, Executive Director.
Thanks, Armando.
Armando Chacon, President of the WCA, longtime West Loop residents. Hello, neighbors.
Matt or May, either of you want to go next?
Sure, I'll go first. Matt Letourneau, hello everyone. President of Neighbors of West Loop, happy to be on the line tonight.
Hi, I'm May Toy. I'm Vice President of Neighbors of the West Loop, and I chair the Parks and Green Space Committee for Neighbors of the West Loop.
Thank you. John?
Hi, I'm John Bosca, President Emeritus, Neighbors of River West.
And Sam, looks like you're here as well.
Yeah, Sam Margarina, President, Neighbors of River West.
Great, thanks everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and share my presentation. Again, we'll have time for questions after the meeting. Let me just make sure we can view this. Oops. Sorry, just hold on a second. I'm going to share the PowerPoint instead. All right, can you guys see this screen?
Yeah, it looks good, Cindy.
Okay, great. All right, so we're going to go through, again, we've done our welcoming. I'll go through some background about the downtown zoning and the bonus system. And then really the focus for tonight's meeting, as I said, we're co-hosting this with Alderman Burnett. It's about the West Loop local impact funds within his ward. And then we'll go over some general planning related updates and next steps, as well as Q&A. So this is a virtual meeting format, of course, and it is a Zoom webinar format. The meeting is being recorded, as Kevin indicated at the beginning. The recording will be available on DPD's webpage, www.chicago.gov/westloop. And please use the Q&A Zoom function box for any questions during the webinar. All questions and ideas are valid, and we'll either respond to you in writing or verbally during the meeting. I do want to explain that we sent out this meeting notice to about 1,000 people, and if you did not get the notice from the department, then please sign up for getting this e-blast. Again, you can go to our webpage, www.chicago.gov/westloop, to do so. For this meeting, we had about 100 people that registered. We did ask a few questions during the registration process. 74 people live in the West Loop. 59 of those registrants work in the West Loop, and 71 registrants own property in the West Loop. So that's a good feedback to know. So really, I wanted to start the conversation about the downtown bonus system. It started off. And to be able to ask any questions or. I think we need to mute that person. Okay. We need to zoom out a little bit and look at the city as a whole. And what we were seeing, and I think all of you are aware of this, there's definitely some inequity that's been plaguing our city for decades, of course. And you see this very clearly on this map, where the dark blue is very high income and the bright orange is very low income areas of the city. And you can really see the middle income folks have been reducing between 1970 and 2017. The very low income has really expanded, unfortunately, and it takes a large part of the south and west sides of the city, while the north and northwest sides of the city are growing in very high income. So really, to address this and change this paradigm, we established in 2016 an expansion of downtown to assist in these areas that lack private investment. So this change in code had two benefits. It accommodates ongoing central area growth, and Chicago pre-pandemic was the fastest growing city in the US. And also this downtown zoning change provides new funding sources to underserved neighborhoods. Since that expansion, as you can see, 80% of the downtown bonus system goes to neighborhood commercial corridors. If you want to know more about this program, the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund, you can go to www.chicago.gov/NOF. So 80% of the funding goes to neighborhood commercial corridors that are underserved in the city. And then 10% of the funding goes to the local impact funds, which is the topic of our meeting tonight. And 10% of the funding goes to citywide landmark, Adopt a Landmark program. Just to give you a sense a little bit, we have awarded about 180 projects across the west, southwest, and south sides of Chicago. And then Adopt a Landmark funds, we've also awarded every year to a variety of projects, including, churches in Bronzeville and in Ukrainian Village, and arts-focused project in Pullman as well. Of course, this area, if you're familiar with the Fulton Market area, we've had a lot of development reviewed and approved since the 2014 was when we adopted the Fulton Market Innovation District Plan, and 52 planned development projects valued at $15.2 billion in total project costs, which equates to more than 30,000 construction jobs and almost 65,000 permanent jobs. And the projects approved to date are obligated to contribute $113 million in neighborhood opportunity bonus funds to the city. Now, not all of that has been collected because they're obligated to contribute this in their plan development documents, but we collect that money when those projects are submitted for permit. So as of September 1st, we've collected $47 million in neighborhood opportunity funds from the projects within this ward. So 10% of that is 4.7 million local impact funds. And some of that have already been collected and used. So we've already used $1.4 million for the construction of the West Loop Library, which has been a great success. Some of this funding, just over 500,000 that has been collected, is committed to the Skinner Park Field House. And that was, you can, through this bonus system in the plan development project, identify where the local impact funding is going to be used. And so in these cases, that's where the funding was identified in those plan development projects. About 243,000 was committed to, this is outside of the West Loop area on Milwaukee and Erie for an open space there. That project, again, that's been committed to that future project. And then almost $300,000 in local impact fund was also assigned to Lake Street lighting. However, CDOT will be installing this lighting as part of their Lake Street reconstruction project. So we actually can utilize that funding for a different project if we need to. And so we do have about $2.5 million in local impact funds available for the West Loop downtown area. So there's some, when the neighborhood opportunity bonus system passed, there's some requirements here. So we have to consult, if the plan development ordinance does not specify a specific improvement, which these $2.4 million, did not, then DPD, in consultation with the alderman of the ward in which the plan development site is located, may allocate such funds to eligible improvement projects anywhere in the downtown area. So we have to follow this process. We have to consult with the alderman of the ward, and we have to make sure the funds will be able to be spent on an eligible improvement in the downtown area. So here are the eligible projects. They're bulleted at the bottom of the slide. It's parks and green space improvements, pedestrian streetscape and furniture infrastructure improvements, not furniture, bicycle network, burying utilities underground, transit infrastructure improvements, restoration of landmark buildings, and improvements for public buildings and facilities. So here's kind of a map. There's a lot of information here, but really the area that's kind of cross-hatched in this orange color is the area that we are talking about for eligibility here. This overlays kind of the West Loop and the ward boundary, because again, we have to consult the ward alderman in which the project is being funded. And then this also shows the landmark district within this boundary as well. So we did, as part of the meeting notice for this community meeting, we also provided a survey again, and our goal is to get feedback from everyone about what their priorities are. And so if you did not get the link to that survey, then you can again go to www.chicago.gov/westloop and find the survey there. So our process for assigning this $2.5 million of local impact funds is we've been doing some coordination meetings with leadership from the local community groups. We're hosting this community meeting with the alderman. We want to get feedback from the survey. And then of course, we'll review the survey results with the alderman and the leadership from these community groups, and we'll decide on priorities and implement them. And the work can be for implementation, but it can also be for procuring a consultant for design and planning work associated with the impacted agencies. So for example, if it's for park improvements, the park district can then procure a team to do that design work. Or if it's for the library, for example, that funding went to the library system for them to be able to build that project. So here we are just kind of going through. We thought it would be a good opportunity to also give you some updates from the adoption of the Fulton Market Innovation District Plan that was adopted in February at Plan Commission. Again, to reiterate the three main goals that were identified. We want to promote mixed use and mixed income developments. We want to provide more affordable housing options and create pedestrian-friendly streets and sustainable open spaces consistent with design excellence and urban design best practices. We want to improve access for all transportation modes, promote alternative modes of transportation, and improve traffic circulation with infrastructure and transit improvements using both private and public resources. We know traffic is a major concern for a lot of folks. And we also have more information about affordable housing in this presentation to kind of go through some of the updates as well on that. Goal 3, to protect and enhance historical and cultural assets. Of course, this is what makes Fulton Market really unique here is the landmark district and other historic assets. And so we also want to encourage events and public art as part of both private and public development. So, of course, one of the strategies identified in the plan was to update the Affordable Housing Requirements Ordinance, and hopefully you are all aware, but that update did pass City Council earlier this year, and it's effective starting October 1st. So all of the projects that you will be seeing at the Plan Commission are now under this new ARO ordinance, which requires downtown residential plan developments to include 20% affordable units. But in addition to the 20% affordability, we wanted this area north of Lake Street to be committed to provide more than that with a target goal of 30% affordable units within this geography. So to accomplish that, we wanted to provide the teams with, a carrot rather than a stick. So we understand that providing an extra 10% of affordability is not really necessarily easy to do. So the Department of Housing has been working with developers very closely in providing low-income housing tax credits to assist with the financing of the 30% affordable housing units, including the first 20% required by the ordinance, the ARO ordinance. And then there's some other affordability options as well. And so they're meeting working very closely with these developers. And if anybody has any specific questions, they can ask at aro@cityofchicago.org for more information on this incentive and program. But some of you may not be aware, but Illinois, the state, also passed some legislation that really provides also additional property tax incentives for developers to provide more on-site affordability in their residential projects. So it's 3 different tiers of property tax incentives for new construction and then rehab residential buildings with 7 or more units that set aside between 15 to 35% of their units as affordable. For example, a downtown residential project with a minimum of 7 units at 35% affordable tier of 60% AMI, the tax incentive of 35% assessed value for 10 years with 2 renewable 10-year periods for a total of 30 years. So this makes meeting the 30% affordability goal that much easier or a little easier. And so here's also from the Fulton Market Innovation District Plan, the strategy for dealing with providing more open space, a green space in this area. We recognize there's the Union Park, which is just to the west of Randolph Street, but there's definitely a desire and goal for more green space. We have some opportunities along these linear streets to create those green spaces. There's opportunity along Hubbard. We think there's opportunity along Carroll because so many of those parcels will be redeveloped in the short term. And then of course, Randolph Street is a very wide street with the service lanes. There's CDOT is doing a feasibility study on what can be done to reconfigure that street. But then in the green circles, you see also we are advocating and working with new projects as they come in to get pocket parks, plazas, dog parks, all sorts of green space that are required to be publicly accessible, but privately maintained, which is great that they would be maintained without tax dollars. And then, of course, you're all familiar with the Fulton Market Streetscape that was recently completed. It's a flex street, one of the first in Chicago to be built. And luckily, it was proved to be truly flexible during this time of the pandemic for restaurants to be able to utilize outdoor seating. Just over $20 million in TIF was utilized for that streetscape project. And here's another photo of Hubbard Street, the existing conditions. You know, there's not even a sidewalk on that south side of the street. And there are these beautiful murals, but really hard to look at them and enjoy them when you're on the other side of the street. So here's an opportunity if we are interested in it. And here's some images just of projects that have been approved or completed with some outdoor space that is publicly accessible and has landscaping as well for creating these kind of pocket park areas. We also, if you recall, completed the infrastructure study for the Kinsey area north of Lake Street. And we have identified several items of priority that need improvement. And so this is something that we are tracking as well. And really the short-term priority is the at-grade Metra crossing improvements. And this is something that CDOT and Metra and we have been working on, DPD. With Metra, we did procure a consultant. They are in the process of working on their phase 1 engineering. So that is good. So we should be able to start final design sometime in the near future, pending funding as well. And then longer priorities, of course, we'd like to see more utilities be buried. The viaducts certainly need improvement, but that takes some coordination with other agencies. And then other work that we think is would be helpful is, we've heard from folks wanting some more bike lanes or improvement of the street network. And of course, CDOT has been very busy in this area. They again completed the Fulton Market Streetscape. We're doing the phase 1 engineering for the track crossings. Lake Street will be reconfigured. I think starting either by the end of this year or next year. Randolph Street Corridor improvement study is underway, and we are also doing, CDOT is also doing a feasibility study for a new Metra station, and Metra is doing a feasibility study for the HU track realignment. And we will be doing a community meeting in mid-October to explain to the community the status of those two initiatives. And then CDOT is also working to do a Fulton Market traffic area study as well. There had to be a hold on that just because of the pandemic, but they're going to ramp that up shortly. And I said before, new light fixtures have been installed. You can see on this map how they're tracking it at CDOT. So a lot of them are along Lake Street and Fulton and some on Kinsey, as you can see the purple dots. And then there's also going to be more lights installed, as you can see on the bottom map, with along Lake and some along Ogden as well. And then our third goal, protecting historic and cultural assets. Hopefully you've been seeing that we have made some progress on this. We did protect and landmark the former Schlitz Brewery Tide House at 1393 West Lake. And we also have 2 planned development projects that incorporated historic properties that they're going to be retaining and rehabbing as part of their project. Those are on the top left, on the top right, and the bottom image as well. And then we're doing, of course, ongoing planning and implementation efforts. We again have the West Loop Resource Guide webpage. That's where you can find links to all of this information. And then we're continuing to work on the implementation of our plan that was adopted in the February. Of course, we want to continue to coordinate this local impact fund and help to determine our priority for this area. We have also started the Fulton Market and Randolph Street P designation, pedestrian street designation. This was something that we received a lot of positive feedback on during our plan process. So this is going to be proceeding in the near term. And again, the Metra Station feasibility study, we have an upcoming informational community meeting in mid-October. You will be seeing notices shortly. And we did also publish a Central City Recovery Roadmap earlier this year, and this was really, trying to deal with the impact of the pandemic on downtown. We recognize that it's been a difficult year and a half. No one expected this to happen. So this was more of everyone kind of getting together, collaborating and figuring out kind of short-term action plans, but also medium term, how do we reposition downtown so that we can recover, as quickly as possible. And then we've also initiated the Committee on Design. We hear a lot at the community meetings, concerns about, designs of buildings in the West Loop area. So this is something that is really for the whole city, but we do anticipate that some of the projects that you will be seeing at your community meetings, we will also be sending them to the Committee on Design. It's an esteemed group of talented architects, artists, landscape architects, really to try to improve the design excellence that we're seeing in the city, because it's an important part of the city's the architecture of the city is a really important part of what makes this city a great city. And then the citywide planning process is ongoing, doing engagement as well. And they're actively soliciting as much engagement as possible. So if you have any questions about that, there's also a webpage that you can get more information about. So really, we're hoping today to answer your questions, of course, and then if you can complete the survey, please do so. It will be open till October 10th. Again, if you do not have a link to that survey, you can find it at www.chicago.gov/westloop. And again, we'll just synthesize comments that we get today, as well as the public survey responses, as well as you can give us comments if you want to provide us something more detailed. We're happy to review that, and we can get questions sent to us, dbd@cityofchicago.org. So I'm going to stop sharing. And I'll go, we did get a few questions in advance of the meeting, so I'll go to those, but I wanted to first give the opportunity to some of our fellow leaders in the community a chance to ask their questions if they have any. Is anyone burning with a question? If not, I can go to the questions that we received in advance of the meeting. Oh, Carla.
Yes. Hi, Cindy. Yeah. Hi, good evening, everyone. And thank you all very much for your time this evening. One of the topics that we have been hearing come across has been the concern of the lack of coordination, or the perception of a lack of coordination between wards and the local impact funds. And I know that that's trickled into some of the chat, but just to kind of bring that to the forefront, because that has been something we've been hearing concerns of.
Yeah, that's a fair concern. It's a very good question. And really the way the ordinance is set up, we have, again, tracked them because we need to consult with the alderman of the ward. I mean, that's what the ordinance says. We have to consult with the alderman of the ward how that funding from that PD project is going to be used. So we have kind of coordinated with Alderman Burnett. We've been coordinating with Alderman Riley. We've been coordinating with Alderman Hopkins, Alderman Dowell, Alderman King. So any alderman that has this funding, Alderman Cicho Lopez, we do coordinate with them on what they would like to spend the money on. Absolutely. Hopefully that.
Hello, did you say something to me, Cindy?
No, Alderman, I was just explaining that for funding that we have, the local impact funding that we have in other wards, we do also coordinate with those aldermen for how they want to spend the money for their local impact funds. I don't know.
And that's why I wanted her to meet with you all so we can figure out what projects y'all may have that we can spend some money on.
Correct. Correct. And I mean, that's how the ordinance was written. So we're just like bound by that framework, by that legal framework. Does anybody else? Armando?
Yes, Cindy, thank you. It's not really a question, and I don't want to take up too much time. I'd like for us to get to the other questions from everybody else. But a lot of the concerns that we've been having and issues we've been having have been around increased crime and pedestrian safety. We've done a lot over the years to increase pedestrian safety with more stop signs. However, as you know, that Madison, there was some plans for Madison that were included in the West Loop design guidelines, essentially called for a Madison streetscape project that was focused on pedestrian safety. So it wasn't an or, it was really an and. So it was removal of the medians, along with a second phase that included, with an effort to reduce speeds and increase pedestrian safety and increase the pedestrian experience with corner bump outs, with landscape area, refuge islands with bump outs, some seating and lighting were included. But in addition to that, the WCA would like to recommend for consideration additional signage with maybe a lighted sign we see in other parts of the city or the country. It just makes sense. And then the other new recommendation that we would have is there's been a call for speed bumps. I think we think a better solution is raised intersections. And what that does is a couple things. It stresses more of a concern and attention to pedestrians rather than cars. And it also, I think it's frankly more attractive, having a raised intersection rather than speed bumps. And again, it would slow traffic down. So I would like to, and I know that, the wards kind of cross and share Madison.
Yes.
So, maybe this is something that we can coordinate with Alderman Sitchko in trying to address and get funding for this.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it was included in design guidelines. We've done phase one, thanks to to Alderman Burnett, of removing the medians, but now really would like to focus on doing the second phase of that.
All right, thank you so much for that input. Yeah, I understand there's concerns about pedestrian safety on Madison. I've heard that as well.
Thank you.
I have no problem with looking at that, Cindy, after we see everything else that's been
I think
presented.
we need to see, let's look at all of the responses, and but it's great to get that feedback. I mean, that's the whole point of this exercise is, I don't think the aldermen and DPD, we don't want to just say this should go here. We want to get this input. So we want to make sure. And of course, we're not going to get 100% agreement. There's going to be people who, want things, different things, but hopefully we can at least get a sense for the majority agreement. That would be really great. Okay, so I'm going to
and certainly if we can use some of the funds and then parlay them with, maybe some funds from CDOT or TIF or other sources. I mean, clearly, I know there's just not enough money to get all the things that we want, but I think if we can prioritize safety, pedestrian safety, the way we've done in other streets in the West Loop, which is much appreciated, no question about it. And again, I'm very appreciative to Alderman Burnett for that. But I think public safety has become very, very important to our neighborhood, as we have unfortunately experienced some very unfortunate things happening in the neighborhood.
Yeah,
So I'll
Sam.
be quiet now.
Thanks, Armando. Sam?
Yeah, we had a space we were looking at along Grand Avenue, kind of between the east of the old gas station over to like the highway, north of Grand Avenue. But John knows a little better. But I think part of it was owned by CDOT. The city owned it some lots also there. That could be a nice green space area.
Yeah, Cindy, that's over by Morgan. That's on Morgan.
And
It
Grand?
starts, yeah, Morgan and Grand.
So I think that's outside of the downtown area. So we wouldn't be able to use local impact funds for that.
Cindy, we may have, I mean, they built several buildings over in that area too that may be NOF also.
Okay, we'll take a look. We'll take a look. May?
Hi. I think just to follow up on Armando's point, I think that and to your point, Cindy, there's a lot of I think sidewalks around, like I know around Skinner, definitely there's sidewalks that are buckling and flooding that creates that ADA accessibility to public spaces like the park. And I think that earlier we had recommended basically some intersections for flashing stop signs, especially around the schools and parks. I think those, I think from a public safety standpoint, I think are important uses for this type of funding. So I'm just throwing that into the pot. Thank you.
So Cindy,
I think our list is going to be very long, right?
yeah. So
Yeah.
are we going to get a list and then we're going to prioritize or have people vote on something or what?
Yeah,
right.
we're gonna.
But we also still are blessed in some parts of this area to have a TIF to be able to utilize, especially
Right.
for some of the infrastructure stuff. So
That's exactly right. So I think we have to first gather the list of priorities together and then determine what can be funded by what resource. So and what our priorities are.
yeah, and then we may be able to get some developers to pay for some of it too.
Right. Exactly. That's always good. So I'm just going to go to some of the questions that I received in advance of the meeting. One of the questions, I think we kind of touched on it already. Why are we looking at just the 27th ward and not all 4 wards? Impact funds can be used within a mile of projects in any of these 4 wards. It's deceptive. I'm just reading this verbatim. It's deceptive to label this as a West Loop exercise when it's just the 27th ward and a fraction of the funds available. So, I mean, like I said, we're just kind of following the framework of what the ordinance has identified that we need to coordinate with the alderman of the ward whose PD it was located in. So that's what we're trying to do. And it is a fraction of the amount that's true. It's a fraction of the amount that has been committed to the NOF program. But again, we're limited. We're limiting our discussion today and the survey on what is available to us from the collected funds. So that's kind of maybe the difference that this person is noting. Then another question about the Skinner Fieldhouse and Alderman Burnett, this was a question maybe that's for you. The Skinner Fieldhouse, apparently you had said that it was fully funded. So I'm not sure if that's true, if you're able to, if you know the status of the Fieldhouse funding. And it says that the Fieldhouse shows us that we've identified 500,000 before we've given a chance to vote. So that was just funding that was identified, as I said, as part of PD projects and it's not all of it. It hasn't been utilized yet. So it's been identified for Skinner Park Fieldhouse, but it hasn't been utilized. And so we are talking today about the other funding that hasn't been identified in PD projects, where we're trying to find what we should be prioritizing for that money. And then I think there's more questions about the process for Skinner Park Fieldhouse and that process. I haven't been really part of that process, so I'm not able to answer that. I don't know if anybody else on this call has more information about that, but that I think the goal tonight was really to talk about the uncommitted funding. So I just want to make sure we focus on that. And then there's concerns about why these community groups were given access to this community meeting. I mean, we are just coordinating with the community groups in this area like we normally do in our processes, but we are doing this community meeting, and the survey really is to get input from everybody. And so that's really the intention here. And another question about why not do this as participatory budgeting, one person, one vote. That is the intention of the survey, frankly, is to get feedback from each person. It's, that's just the best way that we know how to request for input. And another question, why are you including landmark improvements in the neighborhood impact fund list? Isn't that a separate fund? Yes, there is a separate fund for Adopt a Landmark. Absolutely, they get 10% of the downtown density bonus, and that is a citywide program. And then owners who own landmark buildings need to apply for that grant funding. However, in the local impact fund ordinance, there's also eligibility for locally designated landmark buildings to receive the local impact fund. There is that option as well. So just in full transparency, we've included that in the survey as an option because it is an option under the ordinance. Okay, so this is the all the questions that we received in advance. Okay, I'm going to go through the questions that we're getting in the chat. So thank you first. We have a lot of questions in the chat. So I'm going to try to get through all of these as best we can. What's the feasibility of using some of this land to buy land for new public parks in the West Loop Fulton market? The historic district area is severely lacking in public space, guaranteed and maintained by the city. This will only make it worse by all the dense developments being approved, not including public open space built by private developers, which can be made private at their whim. So I'm going to answer that right now. So, I mean, the funding, I don't know that $2.5 million is going to cover buying land in this area. I mean, land in this area is pretty expensive. And I do want to stress that the open space in these developments, the ones that have significant open space, like the one that we just had a community meeting for a project being developed by Trammell Crow that has a pretty significant sized open space. And we talked about this at the community meeting, and I think it was last week, all the days are blending together, but they will have a developer easement and maintenance agreement. This is recorded on their property, and this requires them to maintain the open space. It requires them to keep it publicly accessible during the same hours and using the same kind of standard requirements that are used for Chicago Park District parks. So that is something that is required. It's the same agreement or similar agreement type of method that we have imposed on other large projects in the city. So just so that you are aware that's an extra it's an actual easement on the property. Okay, and then this other comment, my wife and I moved here from Denver a little over 2 years ago and have loved living along Hubbard Street, where there are some great artworks and lots of people coming to enjoy them and walking around hunting for art. It reminds us of the Reno Art District. Since our street represents one of the best opportunities to improve a streetscape, and we've also seen that the city included in their West Loop plan, can we put these funds meant for streetscape to work for Hubbard Street? So that's an option. So again, we'll compile the survey results and the feedback we're getting, and we'll consider that. More specifically, sidewalks, trash cans, and general beautification of Hubbard Street to elevate this unique area and make it dog-friendly, jogger-friendly, artist and visitor-friendly. Thank you. So that's just a comment, noted. One of the questions is developers cannot buy out of this requirement. No, they cannot. They have to give the money. If they are using bonus square footage, there is a formula, and they have to, when they submit for a permit, we collect that money, and if we don't get it, they don't get the permit. So it's an ordinance, it's a law. So that's a good thing. I have a few questions. Oh, I think I've answered these questions already. So any of the affordable is required on site. Ricardo has joined us, Ricardo Lopez. Are you able to answer this? I think the question will be pertaining to the 2021 ARO.
Okay. Yeah, good evening, everyone. So the 2021 ARO requires, as Cindy stated, in the downtown area, a set aside of 20%. So if you're, for example, if you're building a residential development with 100 units, your ARO obligation will be 20 units. And of that 20%, those 20 units, 5%, a quarter, is required to be built on site. The other 25% could be built on site or off site, of which it makes the required units. The new ordinance requires half of the 20% to be built. The balance, the remainder balance, the other 10% could be paid in lieu. Now, of course, in an ideal scenario, given the inclusionary, mission of the ordinance, developers could build all on site. But the idea is to offer options and some flexibility. So I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Ricardo. One more question about this.
Hold on, Ricardo. So Ricardo, it's a little different in the Fulton market though, north of Lake Street.
Oh, yes, Alderman, you're correct. I was speaking only to the sort of overall 2021 ARO ordinance. The Alderman is correct. As part of the Fulton Market Innovation District, the area in the FMID north of Lake Street, because it didn't previously allow for residential development. It now allows for residential development. The expectation there is for the city to work with developers to try to reach an affordability of 30%. As Cindy indicated, there's a number of resources that we're working to make available. Right now, we are offering 4% tax credits, but this is one where we are meeting with developers to try to reach that goal, the city goal of reaching 30% affordability in that area north of Lake Street.
And that's on site, and the 4% tax credits is only for the 10% of the 30%.
Alderman, so the 4% tax credits could be applied to the total development cost.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, another question, Ricardo, was how long are the units required to be affordable?
They are required to be affordable for a period of 30 years. And so the one note that I would point out here is that for rental units, it's 30 years. For sale units, so ownership units go into the Chicago Community Land Trust. The affordability period is 30 years. However, if a owner were to sell their unit within that 30-year period, at point of resale, the 30-year clock will restart. That is the only difference between rental and ownership units.
Thanks, Ricardo.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going through a lot of these questions we've already discussed. and they're repeated. A question, we're meeting after you spent or allocated most of funds. That's actually not accurate. I mean, the slide that I showed during the panel, my presentation, if you look at the numbers, we've spent the money on the library, and then we've allocated some funding for Skinner Park Fieldhouse. That's it. So we haven't spent any other money. So that's the intent of this meeting and our outreach. Why are the other 3 aldermen not on this call? So we've been coordinating with the other aldermen on the impact fees that are impacting their wards as well. So this is, this is something that we're doing with each alderman. And we can coordinate with them if there's a project that overlaps 2 wards. We would absolutely coordinate with the alderman. So don't developers buying more density increase? Sorry, I have to go back and say I've done all of these. Sorry. The list keeps growing, so I'm just trying to get through them all. Okay, we've done the affordability questions. Okay. Don't developers buying more density increase the amount able to spend within the local impact funds? So the bonus is maxed. There's a maximum amount that's allowed. So in a -5, if the underlying zoning is given a -5 downtown designation, then they are allowed to bonus up to an 8.1. So that's 3.1 in bonus. So that's all they're allowed. If they're a -7, then they can bonus. I think it's 5. I don't want to get my numbers wrong. Maybe Fernando remembers the exact number, but it's like 5. I want to say it's 5.75. So this is all outlined in the zoning ordinance. So they, if they've reached their maximum, and that's what the PD authorizes them, then that's it. Then they can't. Then they're not able to just give more to get more square footage. So that I've answered. So
For a DX7, the maximum benefit bonus is 4.5.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Fernando. May, did you have a question? Your hand is raised.
Hi. I didn't have a question so much as I wanted to talk a little bit about the Skinner Park Fieldhouse process.
Okay.
So basically, what we've done is we started this process several years ago with a park district. We did a lot of community outreach, before basically working towards a field house with the park district. The park district actually asked us to start the process because there was a need for a field house. And my commitment to the community and my response to the park district was that if we, from the advisory council standpoint, started advocating for a field house, it would be a facility to serve the community. And that's something that we felt very important about. We've done a lot of outreach with the community, and that's one of the reasons why the process has stalled for a little bit, because we did not want to give up green space. The community has expressed to us that they did not want to give up green space to build a field house. So we have looked for alternative locations, and that's why we have a survey out there asking people, if they would support basically building a field house on the current Police Academy parking lot, which would actually allow us to have a field house and preserve what a green space we have in the neighborhood. Currently, with the updated 2020 census data number, we're at, if you count Union Park into the figure, we're about 43 acres. We have an open space deficit of 43 acres. If we don't count Union Park, we have 56 acres. So that's a lot of green space that we need to serve the existing population. And that's before opening up Fulton Market for residential development. I mean, I think that I'm very sensitive to the green space issue that we have. I'm a strong advocate for it. I believe it's an important amenity for the community. But I think that it's something that needs to be balanced and worked on from a community standpoint. And I'm committed to having a open design process. The field house has not been designed. We're not moving forward with a field house unless we secure a location. And that's where we're at right now. And so while the city has said, there's funding available for it, I cannot in good conscience agree to give away, and neither is the rest of the advisory council, to take away green space from this community, to build a field house. And so I just want to address that and put that to rest.
Okay, thanks, May, for the update.
Thank you.
Thanks for the update. Someone has put a comment in the chat, in the Q&A about concern about this meeting format. And is this something they're not able to have a two-way discussion? And really, I mean, our intent of this meeting was really more to be informational and to gather feedback. And if you would like to have a two-way discussion, I'm happy to do that. And you can email dpd@cityofchicago.org and provide me with your contact information. And I'm happy to schedule a separate call so we can discuss your concerns. But I mean, we really are trying to get as much feedback as possible in a fair and transparent way, frankly. So that is the reason for this format.
What were
I'm
the
happy to
plans?
discuss. Yeah.
Oh, what was the plans for the police academy when they moved to the new location? The police academy location?
Yeah, I'm not aware of a plan for after they've moved for
That's a
that
big
person.
site.
So, Sam, currently there is no official plan for it.
Correct.
The Park District does own the land that the police academy sits on. The Park District had provided the land for usage of that, as well as land that most of the Winnie Young sits on. So the advisory council has been asking for the police academy site for use to expand Skinner Park to provide more green space for the community. It is the last piece of, I believe, city-owned land in the West Loop.
Could you use the police academy as a field house, convert it?
We've been talking to the Park District about that. So, but right now the police is delayed in moving out. They're delayed about 6 years. And so this is kind of like where we had this rub about where to put the field house, because that was the original intent, was to repurpose that building and as a field house. So we're kind of at a standstill. I'm looking for a solution with the city right now because the police obviously have not built their new facility yet.
And, Cindy, if I can add, I mean, it's great to have this forum, and certainly I would continue to encourage everyone in our community to share their feedback with you. But, it sounds like have been talking for years about more green space, and May Choi has been advocating for that. So I think that continues to be a priority, but we're talking about green space. We're talking about public safety. I don't really think it's something we can talk about in this forum here today, but certainly I'd be remiss if I didn't mention our efforts for a high school solution for our fastly growing community, and maybe we can find another time to talk about that. But there's several folks that we've been working together to try to come up with a solution, and we think we have a good one, quite frankly. So, but as far as these other projects and other things that we can do, I think we should continue to be all ears about them. But, you know, the process isn't perfect, but it is a process, and it gives us an opportunity and a platform to give feedback and make influence what we get. We have a lot of needs. So to that, I would just say I would continue to just encourage you to just get your comments in. That's why we're doing this.
That's exactly right. And you know, I want to stress, you know, even though we've been talking and coordinating together, I mean, that there's comments here, you know, whose feedback is more important, I guess, and that's that's kind of I don't even know how to really respond to that. I mean, we're trying to get as much feedback as we can, and we don't want to make a decision in a vacuum is really our goal. So that's one other commenter. I live on Hubbard Street, and I think that the green space on the south side of the street is a perfect candidate for streetscape enhancement. The green space already exists. The space is underutilized because of the current state. So that was her comment. Safety concerns are all over. Look at May Toy. We are lucky she is alive. I agree. In addition, it's not just Madison, it's Van Buren, it's Randolph. I would like to see services that were taken away, like police patrol, street sweeping, that needs to be remapped and implemented, not to mention streets that are too narrow and allow parking next to TOD buildings. So in terms of services, you know, I completely understand this comment. It's just, you know, for this particular topic, this local impact funds, we're not able to spend it on services or security or anything like that. You know, if you're looking for that kind of a resource, you know, I know that special service area is something that's controversial in some areas, and but that is one way that other commercial corridors have been able to provide funding for additional security. So that is totally up to the community, though. We don't get really, we don't really say you should do this or you shouldn't do this. It's totally up to the people who live and are impacted by that. Not sure if this is relevant, but the entrance ramp on Randolph westbound is in bad shape. Is that something that could be addressed? Also, regarding the increased property taxes, is that just up to appeal, or is there any comments on that? So yeah, this meeting is not the forum to talk about increased property taxes. I mean, if you have a concern about that, you can appeal. There is an appeal process. It's all available online. That's not something that our department handles. But the entrance ramp on Randolph westbound is in bad shape. I don't know, Jeff, are you aware of any kind of evaluation on that? It looked to me like there's a lot of construction going on in this general area for the.
Yeah, I think I might ask whoever put that comment in if they could send maybe a little more details on exactly where the concern is to the DPD address, and then Cindy, that can be forwarded along to me, and I'll be able to respond.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Traffic on Halsted needs to be dealt with. That impacts a lot of people and businesses. So I think, Jeff, Halsted Street would be in your traffic study, right? When CDOT does this traffic study for this geography. So
that's right. So we'll be looking at kind of all of the streets in the area, in the Fulton Market area, particularly looking at are there other options for potentially some one-way street patterns on some of the north-south streets. A lot of the east-west streets already have that. That tends to simplify traffic flow and simplify the ability to cross the street for people walking. But all those options are on the table. As Cindy mentioned, that study is just now getting started. We had hoped to start it a couple of years ago, but then COVID came and it really kind of disrupted, with all the traffic counts being down, it's really not, the observations we'd make back then wouldn't have been very useful. So now we're getting that started this fall and into next year.
Thanks, Jeff. Matt, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to interject. I guess at a higher level, understanding the amount of money, the amount of funds that we've generated, the amount of funds that we anticipate to be generated through active and upcoming developments, being able to track that and have a good feel for that would be helpful. Just to set the expectations for the community as to what can be done with those types of dollars. If we're talking about intersection improvements, how many intersections might we be able to improve from a safety standpoint? If we're talking about creating green space, you mentioned that we're a bit cost limited in creating green space just because of the cost of real estate in the neighborhood. Can you sort of set some expectations about if we were to implement pedestrian safety measures, would that be at 100 intersections throughout the West Loop, or would that be at 4 or 5? Just give a feel to the audience of what we're talking about with the funds that we have.
I don't know, Jeff, if you would be able to answer that or not. $2.5 million.
Sure, there's a one size fits all answer, because it really kind of depends upon what is the appropriate intervention at each intersection. I mean, just in very general terms, I mean, just pedestrian safety type of improvements at a particular intersection typically involve the curb bump outs to shorten the crossing distance. I think those types of improvements were mentioned earlier. And those, it can be in the hundreds of thousands, but it also depends, does it impact drainage or utilities? And then if there's underground work, that can start to bring up the cost. And so it's really difficult to sort of give a general answer to that. If there's signalization improvements, those tend to be in the sort of mid hundreds of thousands of dollars to add a new traffic signal at an intersection, or to basically rebuild one. So that's sort of the order of magnitude in a very rough sense. But again, it's really on a case by case basis. It's kind of hard to generalize.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's helpful because we have the $2.48 million total in mind, and some of the numbers you've given there. I think hopefully that gives the audience a better feel for the extent of the improvements that we could make, depending on which we choose to go forward with.
Those are just traffic related improvements. Obviously, the neighborhood has other needs besides traffic, so we'll have to balance, how much to traffic and how much to other needs, and hopefully this will continue over years to come too, so we can prioritize over the course of time as well.
And Jeff, I'm really glad that you're on the call. Just thinking, since you're on the call here, and sort of in an effort to maximize the funds that we do have, since you're here listening, again, I'm glad that you are. Is there a way for CDOT to use funds elsewhere to address some of the pedestrian safety improvements that we're talking about, so that we can use for now, $2.5 million for some of the other projects that are listed here? And my second question for you is, what do you think about raised intersections? Because I do have some visuals that I can share with you if you need them.
So the first question, I think it gets back to a comment that Cindy made earlier, where it's really good to get all of the ideas on the table, and that can start a prioritization exercise, and also figuring out, what are appropriate sources of funding, if there are appropriate sources of funding that don't, that are sort of beyond the local improvement fund. I mean, obviously, a lot of work that goes on in the area is it's just not funded entirely through local improvement funds. There are other sources too, and then we can begin an exercise of which funding sources are best for the types of projects. So I think those are all discussions still need to be had. And then your comment about raised intersections, that is absolutely a very important type of pedestrian safety improvement and general sort of traffic calming improvement. We have several examples of that in other parts of the city, but it's something that we've just kind of been starting to use in the last decade or so. And I think there's a lot of call in other parts of the city for using these raised intersections. It's a sort of a variant of what's called a speed table rather than a speed hump, sort of combined with a crosswalk. And so I think you gave a very good explanation earlier on the safety benefits. It really raises the profile of pedestrians and pedestrian crossing, while also providing a lot of visual clues to motorists to slow down and to drive more responsibly. So I think again, on a case-by-case basis, we'd have to figure out where those sorts of tools might be most appropriate. And obviously the, traffic engineers and design experts will, would be involved in those decisions, but just as a general tool, absolutely, that's something that we could contemplate.
Thanks, Jeff.
Excuse me, Cindy, Alderman Burnett, if I get cut off, it's because my battery is going dead. So
Okay.
thank you all. So hopefully it don't go dead before you stop.
Yeah, thank you so much. Alderman, there is a question in the chat maybe that you can answer if you are still with us. A question about having a general 27th ward community meeting. Is that something?
My ward is too diverse to do that. So we need to keep it community by community.
Excuse me, Cindy, if I may jump in quickly. Sure. I do want to respond. I have been receiving text messages, emails, and chats, right, regarding the lack of community or the ability for community conversation in this request for having a community meeting. With one of my board members on the line with me, we are going to probably arrange for a community meeting with or without the alderman, with or without participation of the other community groups. But again, an opportunity to have, the voices heard from the community, which is kind of what we've been doing in the past, just having a regular Zoom meeting to allow for everyone to air their recommendations, suggestions, and what we could do is just take the information from there and we'll collect that data and present that forward. I want to make certain though that today's this platform, right, as a presentation mode, as the Assistant Commissioner was saying, this is an opportunity to receive information, not so much to consider this as a community meeting, if you will. We're here as a community to receive information, to go back, process, and then give it back to us. Know that we're not trying, and forgive, I'm going to speak on behalf of Wilco, but we're not trying to come up with any kind of decisions here right now, telling you these are the projects we're moving forward with. We want to hear back from everyone. And honestly, I've put our info@westloop.org if everyone has an opportunity to drop in kind of their wish list, it would be great. And just know that we will convene some kind of public forum just to air out some of the grievances, but it's not going to happen in tonight's meeting, just as we're receiving information.
Thanks, Carla.
Thank you.
John, do you want to say something?
Questions. First of all, Ogden Avenue is being surfaced right now. Basically from what would be the game or Fry Street southbound to Randolph. The monies that are being used to do that right now, where did those monies come from? And were there any matching funds that came from the West Loop area? That's my first question. Second question is regards to the intersection of Chicago, Milwaukee, Ogden. That is on the edge of the downtown district. However, it does affect the West Loop and some of that activity over there. And can that intersection qualify for any of the impact funds? That's it.
I'm sorry, I was reading some of these questions. Which intersection is it?
Chicago, Milwaukee, and the basically the on-ramp over at where Ogden goes on to the northbound Kennedy.
We'll have to look closely at whether or not that's in the D area. So why don't can you email that to me, John, after the meeting, and we can answer your question. Thank you.
I think there was a question about the Ogden resurfacing. Just to answer that, I don't know exactly where the funding from Ogden Resurfacing came from. I can't say off the top of my head, but typically arterial streets, of which Ogden is one, when they are resurfaced, the funding comes from a combination of federal and state funds. So there's a certain allocation of federal funds that's available through the Illinois Department of Transportation to the city of Chicago every year, and we've developed, arterial resurfacing plans to resurface so many miles per year. I think it's roughly around 50 miles per year or so. And then that's usually matched with state funding, so federal funding and state funding.
Okay. Yep. Thanks.
Okay. I'm just trying to get to as many questions as we can. Jeff, since you were answering one already, why, if developers tear up concrete street, do they either get to cheaply patch it or use cheap asphalt as a replacement?
So all the developers, or anybody really who cuts up a public street is required to repair the street or rebuild the street according to CDOT standards. All of CDOT street construction standards are online. There's the engineering standards of what the base needs to be, and then what all of the different layers of pavement. Sometimes streets appear to be built or have a concrete surface. Usually the streets, when they're rebuilt, they actually are concrete, but with a layer of asphalt on top. Because we find that asphalt is easier to maintain over time and doesn't get as sort of bumpy or disjointed as if concrete is on the very top. So it's kind of some technical road building issues. So it may appear like a concrete street is replaced or with asphalt, but really underneath that asphalt, it's built according to standards. It'll all be concrete, and then just that top surface is asphalt, which that top surface then can get replaced on a regular cycle. I hope that helps answer that question.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. All right, another question to the city. What are the chances of the expanded central area being expanded again to help generate additional neighborhood opportunity and lift funds? That's something we haven't looked at yet. I think with the new census data, we will keep tracking to see if we do need to consider that. But frankly, we've been really focused on just recovering from this pandemic and trying to shore up frankly, downtown, the impact to our neighborhoods and to downtown, has been pretty significant. And we're just trying to understand really, how we can continue to make sure that we have a thriving area for everyone. So that's something we're monitoring closely. I've had a few comments about the survey. There may be some technical issues with it, so I do apologize for that if that is the case. So I'm going to take a closer look tomorrow. No one had identified that to us previously, even though several people had taken it already. So thank you for alerting me to those technical issues, and I'll take a look at that a little bit more closely after the meeting. Another comment, the project at May and Carroll, this is referencing the Trammell Crow's proposal. We had a community meeting last week about it. This was used as an example of bringing green space to the area. Will the city be encouraging future developers to follow this model, building taller, thinner towers, placing as much parking underground as possible, and incorporating green space usable to the public? I think it's dependent on the site that we see for a proposal. Some sites, they're larger and they just have more opportunity for that. So we have been advocating for that, absolutely. But some sites are just not big enough to accommodate a building and open space. So, that's just something we'll just have to deal with as we review them. And hopefully, we can all kind of continue to advocate together for this amenity for the public and for your community. There was a question about live streaming this. This is live streamed on YouTube on DPD's webpage, so you can live stream it and link it to your web pages if you want. Would it be possible to see pedestrian student safety features around our schools and parks that are on par with other neighborhoods? Flashing stops, painted intersections, shortened crossways, and peninsulas. I live by Skinner West and see near misses almost on a daily basis, especially in the evenings when the sun sets to the west while folks are driving west on Adams Street. These seem like relatively low cost improvements. Thank you very much for your feedback. This is exactly the kind of information we are looking to get. Won't speed bumps or raised intersections on main corridors impact EMS? I'm concerned about pedestrian safety, but also think we need to balance EMS access on the main streets. I totally support them around the parks and schools, but don't think they're appropriate for Madison or Van Buren, etc. Jeff, I don't know if you have a comment on that.
Yeah, just briefly, there's, and again, it's the sort of design treatments like that are not one size fits all, that the type of a raised intersection and the particular like slopes that would go up to it and how long the raised part would be, and then the slope going back down and all that are different depending on whether they're on a side street or on a main street like Madison. And exactly for that reason, to be able to accommodate, the appropriate types of vehicles like emergency vehicles and that need to get through, or as well as trucks even on the major streets. So there's different types of variations in these treatments to help make them appropriate depending on the nature of the traffic on the streets that they're serving, while still achieving the objectives of improving safety for people walking. But thank you for that comment.
Thanks, Jeff. Another comment, many of these issues wouldn't be so urgent if the city wasn't rapidly approving dozens of massive development projects in the 27th Ward without proper consideration. Perhaps the city should lengthen the approval process for these or listen more clearly to the voices of the community. Is this something the city has considered? That it's good feedback, and I don't know what your version of too quickly is. I think we hear complaints on the other side as well. Believe it or not, we hear that we're too slow. So I'm sure it just depends what side of the table you're on. The projects go through a thorough review internally. We compare them to the zoning ordinance, the plan development standards and guidelines. We have to coordinate with multiple different agencies and departments, Department of Transportation, traffic studies, and the fire department, and Department of Housing. So there's definitely a lot of reviews that they have to do with the city, but then there's also the community review process. So that is something that the projects in the 27th Ward as well go through. And then we've also, part of the reason for doing the committee on design was, again, to provide a transparent, kind of publicly available meeting for people to see some of the larger projects that are happening in the city, the more impactful ones, and to kind of understand and again, have another opportunity for providing input and a set of experts to kind of review these projects as they're coming through the process. So that's, and then even with Plan Commission, that's just one step of the process. Then it has to go through a city council, zoning committee meeting, and then council approval. So there's, many different steps to go through. And so it may seem like it's fast to you, but I think to some other folks, it may not seem as fast to them. So it just depends on your perspective, perhaps. One of the questions about Mary Bartlemy Park, why didn't we just double the size of that park as part of the 37 South Sangamon development? Again, that's a comment that was noted, but we did not own that site. We own the park, but we don't own the site around it. So that's part of the issue. So we have to create new park space. It requires acquisition of property. And so that is something that is, that park was not that old. It was done, several years ago. It's a beautiful park. Of course, we always want more park space, but again, we have to look at the city as a whole and determine, these are not easy decisions about resources. And I understand there's certainly a need for this community, for a better high school, for more green space. I hear your concerns, I do. And we just need to keep talking about this. I understand it's a concern, but the goal of this meeting was to identify what we can do with this local impact funding that we have already collected. That's the goal of today's meeting. Okay, so I'm gonna try to conclude because we're at an hour and a half at this point. And I think we've really answered as many projects as we're able to at this point. So I want to thank everyone for joining me tonight. And I want to thank everyone for providing your feedback. That was really the intent of the meeting. So thank you. And if you want to continue and did not get your question answered, please again email dpd@cityofchicago.org and we can discuss offline after this meeting. And again, I'm noting the survey, the technical questions about the survey, and I will look into those. So thank you again for alerting me to those. So I don't know if anybody has any closing words. Alderman Burnett, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, again, I want to thank the Department of Planning, Transportation, and Housing for being here this evening. These guys don't get paid extra for being here. So thank you all very much. Again, I requested them to do this to make sure that this community get their fair share of the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund money put back into the neighborhood. So thank you all. Appreciate all of the input that you guys give us so we can start spending some more of this money. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alderman. On that note, thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.